Hi everyone, and welcome once again to the AWS Nordics Ask Me Anything. My name is Gunnar Grosch. I am a developer advocate here at AWS. And this is our weekly show where we bring on AWS experts and talk about a specific topic. And you then, as a viewer, you're able to learn something new, ask any questions you might have, and hopefully in the end of the hour, you both learned something and been able to interact with one of my guests. So this week isn't any different. I have a guest, and this week's guest is someone that we are starting to get used to now, and it is Alexander Dragunov. So welcome to the show, Alexander.
Thank you. So I can introduce myself for the ones who hasn't seen me before. So Alexander Dragunov, and I work as a partner solutions architect at AWS, based in Stockholm, Sweden. And I have specialization, so I'm specialized in Microsoft workloads on AWS. So I don't know, making .NET great on AWS, running your SQL Server workloads, Windows, Active Directory, and everything around it. All the tools we have to help you with your Microsoft workloads.
And this is the third time you're on now, Alexander. Previously, we've had you on to talk about CDK and to talk about .NET on AWS.
Yes, exactly.
But this week, we're going to talk about containerizing and migrating existing applications into AWS. So we're going to cover that topic, see some demos as usual. So I want to remind you that if you have any questions, just put them in the chat and we'll try to get to your question throughout the hour. And if we don't respond to it straight away, don't worry. We'll try to cover questions when they are relevant throughout the topic. So, Alexander, to start things off then, what is an existing application or a legacy application?
Based on our experience, so what I would say, it's the application which was built quite a while ago. So if we talk about Windows, for example, I would say it's .NET Framework application, which could be, I don't know, 15 years old, 10 years old. And in many cases, the team who has developed this application may be already gone. So there is like another team supporting this application. And in some extreme cases, maybe you don't even have source code for this application, but it's up and running on your virtual machine in your data center or on your server in your company. So it's just up and running. So all good with it so far.
So far, yes.
Yes. But in some cases, you want to move this application to the cloud. So, when you move like other kind of applications, other service to a cloud, you want to move these applications as well.
So, what can you do then to move these legacy applications into the cloud?
Yeah. So at AWS we have so-called like 6 R's which you can do with application. So the easiest thing is just to retain the application. So it's running on your servers on-prem, so you just keep it running there, so you don't move it to the cloud. So and you retain it. Another easy option is to retire. Okay, so this application is old, maybe it's not used that much, maybe you already developed new one or you bought new one, so you just retire this application once you move all the needed data to another application. And another option is a repurchase. So maybe the vendor of this application, they already created new software as a service solution. So you just purchase that solution. This vendor will help you to move your data, and then you will start using this new cloud-based application. But when you deal with application yourself, you have another options. So one of the options is to rehost. So this is when you just move your application with server as it is, like move virtual machine as it is to the cloud, and don't do any changes to application. Then another option could be to replatform it. So with replatforming, you don't modify source code of application, but you are moving it to more managed services into the cloud. So I know, for example, if we talk about SQL Server database, you can start using RDS for SQL Server and get all the benefits of, so that we will manage the service yourself and you will care of a database only. And the last thing you can do, you can refactor application. So if you want to get the most of a cloud, all the cloud native features, then probably one of the options could be that you rewrite your application and refactor it. But it's the hardest way because you need to know what application is doing. You need to have like source code, and yeah, but at long run, you will get all the cloud benefits. So this is what you can do.
So those are the 6 R's, which is a common way of looking at how to migrate these existing applications or legacy applications. And I also mentioned containerizing initially. So why would you look at containerizing legacy applications?
So if we containerize application, so I would say that we are replatforming application. So we are not changing source code of application, so we are just packaging it to container. But when you will move this application in a container to the cloud, you will get a lot of cloud benefits without changing the source code of application. So you will have your new enterprise DevOps pipeline using cloud native tooling. Then your application will be portable and isolated, so you can scale it easily, and then you will get like more operational efficiency. So because you will use more optimized cloud infrastructure, because still containers are more compact than virtual machines, even if we're talking about Windows containers, and then you will reduce your IT operation overhead so you will not need to manage all these virtual machines with everything underneath. You will just need to manage your container. So container, like, it's a good step towards the moving to the cloud. And after you containerize application, maybe like the next step could be to refactor application.
Right. Yeah. So have that as a part, as a first step, perhaps then, and then look into one of the other R's. All right. So now we've narrowed it down a bit. We have the 6 R's. We chose replatforming using containerization. So what are some of the problems with containerizing legacy applications then?
Yeah. So it's very easy to say it. Okay, let's containerize application, but in reality, it's not that easy, because many times you don't have necessary domain knowledge about this legacy application. It's developed, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. Teams have changed, and as I said, probably you don't even have source code. So okay, it's just black box. It's running, it's doing its job, but it's running on your virtual machine. Then another problem could be that the team who is managing this application, they lack expertise around containers. So they don't know how to deploy application to containers, what are the best practices, what about security, what about building right CI/CD pipeline. So they need to build this expertise. And another thing, that usually teams are quite busy with day-to-day operations. They need to support this application. They need to do other day-to-day stuff. So they just don't want to touch this application as long as it's working. So.
All right. So I'm just laughing a bit. People in the chat are already trying to ask questions on the things we're getting to. So take it easy. We're getting there. We're trying to build up tension to get to App2Container. But I guess that's where we are now, Alexander. So how can App2Container help with this?
Yeah. So we at AWS, we understand the problems of our customers. What do we have now, and where do we want to move? So we created a tool which will help you to containerize and migrate your existing applications to AWS. So your current applications can be deployed on virtual machine, on-prem, on EC2 instance, maybe already, or in other cloud. And when we talk about legacy applications, currently we support ASP.NET applications, which are running on Windows, on iOS, or Java applications, which are running on Linux. And what App2Container does, it can analyze your application to see what are the dependencies, what are the files used, and then it creates container out of it, and then it creates all required CloudFormation templates, and these CloudFormation templates will be like opinionated AWS way, using like all the best practices which we suggest to our customers. So it will create your ECS or EKS cluster. It will create like task definition for your container. It can create CI/CD pipeline to deploy this application into a production. So in summary, App2Container will help you to easily modernize your existing application and standardize the deployment and operations through the containers.
All right. Yep. Keep going.
Yeah, and currently we support deployment to Elastic Container Service and Elastic Kubernetes Service. So it's up to you to choose what is your target container platform. And as I said, we support two types of applications. So Windows applications, .NET Framework applications running on Windows, and Java applications running on Linux.
All right. So
I guess, yeah. So I guess
do you want to?
I guess
Yeah.
audience are eager to see like what it is and how it works.
Exactly. I was just gonna say that I think it's a good time to just jump into the demo and have a look. If you start your screen share, Alexander.
Yes.
So, hi everyone in the chat. There's a lot of people writing things in the chat already. Nice to have you with us today. We're talking about App2Container, migrating existing or legacy applications to AWS using App2Container. And Alexander has walked us through why we want to migrate, different ways of migrating, then how App2Container can help us with this. And now it's time to jump into the first demo. So there we go.
So you can see my developer box. So first I will show what applications we are going to work with today. So I installed it on my machine. So it's running locally on IIS. So, and this is NOP Commerce. So it's quite popular open source e-commerce application. And I took a quite old version, which was written in .NET Framework. But this is just e-commerce application with some items you can add to shopping cart. So nothing too magic. And this application, in my opinion, it represents the type of business application you can have on your existing environment. And this application is backed by SQL Server database, and I already moved the SQL Server database to RDS. So this application is running locally, but it connects to RDS SQL Server database already running in the cloud. So if we look at Internet Information Server, so as you can see, I have two websites. So I have default website, which is stopped currently, and I have this NOP Commerce website with all the files which I needed to run this application. So this is quite standard setup for your .NET Framework application, which is running on-prem. And now what we want to do, we want to, with least amount of efforts, to run this application on AWS Cloud. And by using App2Container, we are going to containerize this application step by step. So what I already did, I already downloaded the installer for App2Container. So this is the zip file, and you can just download it from AWS website. So you don't need anything to do it. Then I extracted it, and then there is an installer PowerShell script, which I already executed. So I have it installed and up and running. So if I type container -v, it will show me the version of App2Container, which I currently have. So now, first thing you need to do when you use I have two screens. It's hard to find where mouse should go, on the right, or on the left. Okay, so first command which I need to run is container init. So when I installed it, and I need to provide few configuration parameters. So first it's the path for the artifacts, and I already ran this command, so now it shows what I configured before, but I will walk through so you know like what are the inputs which are needed for App2Container.
Yeah, so that's just a local artifact directory.
Yeah. So this is where it will create a Docker file for you. This is where it will put CloudFormation templates. But I will show all the things which I created because currently this is my artifacts folder and it's empty because we will do it from scratch. So this is the path for artifacts. Because we're going to deploy CloudFormation templates, it has to access AWS. So you need to configure instance profile, and this is my virtual machine which has this profile already configured. So this is what I'm going to use. I'm going to run it in Ireland, and when I need to create and configure an S3 bucket for the artifacts. So because some of CloudFormation templates some of nested CloudFormation templates will be put to this S3 bucket. And I already created this S3 bucket. So again, keep it as it is. If I want to send usage metrics to AWS, I can do it. If I want to skip it, I can skip it. And if I want to AWS to help to troubleshoot some issues, I can send generated logs and crash reports to AWS if I want. So, and when I don't want images to be signed by default, so configuration is saved. So I downloaded App2Container, I configure it. So what I can do now is to run App2Container inventory command. So what it does in case of Windows, it will check IIS metadata to see what applications do I have configured in IIS.
So you would run this on your web server, for instance, then?
Yes. So I'm now this virtual machine which I'm in, it's my web server which has application which I want to containerize. But also, if you don't have, so there is App2Container has like two ways to run it. So you can run it on application server itself, or you can run it from outside as well. So this way of running App2Container is also supported. So I run this inventory, and what it showed me that there are two websites in my IIS. So there is a default website, and then there is this NOP commerce website with application. And if you have your like production web server, maybe you will have 5-10 different applications configured. But now I need to choose what application I want to containerize. And the first command which I run is analyze. So I'm specifying and then I need to specify what application I want to analyze, because there are multiple applications that can be running on web server. And I want to analyze this one. So this is the first command we are executing. So what analyze command is doing, it creates files. So it creates like output directory structure with all the files which are used by this application. And also it creates analysis JSON file for the specific application which contains discovered information about the application. And it also contains fields which you can configure. So once this file is generated, I will show it to you. Okay, so the file is generated, and now let's go back to our artifacts folder. So as you see, now this folder is not empty, and there is a subfolder created with a name of analyzed application. And if we go here, currently the most important file is this analysis.json. So this file has two sections. So it has container parameters and analysis info. So container parameters, it's the section that you can edit. So you see, it has a tip for you that it's editable. So you can specify base container image. So by default, it will take container image, base container image, which matches your current version of Windows you're running this application on. But for example, if you don't want, so in my case, it will be Windows Server 2019 long-term support version. But for example, if you want to use semi-annual channel of Windows containers, you can just specify base container image here. Then you specify like what image repository will be used, and it will create this image repository for you. And when there are like so if you want to additionally configure something like additionally exposed ports, or you want to include some additional files, or you want to exclude some files, then you can configure it here. And also there is analysis info section which shows what App2Container discovered so far. So it discovered what kind of operating system it's using, what is the version, what is the application ID, what is iOS version, what are the ports open, where is the physical path, and then what are the features of Windows Server which are enabled on this machine, just in case.
Right.
Okay.
Should we just pause there, Alexander, and take a look at some of the questions we've received so far? Now you've installed App2Container, you've initialized setting certain settings for running App2Container, and you've discovered what applications are running in IIS, and then you've analyzed one of those applications. So let's jump into some of the questions. The first one is in regards to migration strategies that we talked about before. And this is a quite broad question. So is there a migration strategy best practice? For instance, based on the 6 R's, what to choose or how to choose your migration strategy?
No, I would say it depends on the application which are going to migrate and what is the current state of application. So if you are actively developing this application, for example, probably you can go with refactoring, because like you already actively working with this application. Meaning that you have required skills inside your organization. So probably in this case, you would go with refactoring and use the most of a cloud by developing towards the cloud. If you have application, which is, as I said, you have this application, it's up and running, but you don't want to touch it, probably the best practice for you will be to replatform this application. So just, for example, containerize it and run it in containers, but don't touch the source code of application. And yeah. So it's where your organization is in terms of application development, I would say.
Right. And when we talk about App2Container, we're generally talking about replatforming, as you said before.
Yes. So you don't touch source code of application, but you are getting the benefits of running this application into the cloud. Like, so you get your operations in the right way, security in the right way, etc.
This isn't so much a question, but I want to bring it up anyway. We like these kind of comments, so keep them coming as well. AWS is so good, I love you. Well, we love you too. All right, so next we had a question from Vvikberg. You speak of containers. How old can you go? And a hypothesis. It's a very old system. Pages are .cfm, database is MS SQL 8.0, and the app is built upon Internet Explorer 6 and needs that browser to be used.
So as I said, currently we only support either .NET Framework applications running on iOS or Java applications running on Linux. So CFM, I'm not sure what even framework it is, but it's not .NET, it's not Java, I think. And also talking about database, so App2Container is not taking care of your databases. So when you think about data, so like either you can replatform your database to RDS, so like in this case could be RDS for it's Microsoft SQL. So yeah, I guess this one is not supported on RDS. So like the only way would, if you want to, so in this case, you should ask yourself, so why you're using this old version of SQL Server. So like, can you just move the data and use newer version of SQL Server on RDS? And if not, so for example, if your application is, if you have really old application running on Windows and, for example, using, I don't know, SQL Server 6 or 8, we have another tool which is called end of support migration program, so which can help you not to containerize application, but to wrap it in what we called compatibility package, which will help you to like abstract the API calls which your application is doing to old version of operating system and run this compatibility package on the newer version of operating system. But so you will have still your old Windows application, but running on newer version of operating system. But it's not App2Container, it's another tool which is end of support migration program. So you can check what it is.
And this might be a good time to also point you to the webpage for AWS Nordics Office Hours. There is a form there where you're able to schedule a meeting with an AWS expert to talk about specific use cases. I posted the link in the chat now. So this might be one of those cases where it's a good thing to talk to a solution architect from AWS, for instance, to talk about how it would be possible if you really need to keep these older versions. All right. So was there any other question right now? We had a question, trying to find it. I've spammed the chat myself. All right. So let's keep going, Alexander. I'll try to find the questions as we move along. So tell us where we are right now in the process.
Okay, so we analyzed application and we generated this analyze JSON file, which shows what we discovered so far. So the next step would be to containerize application. And as you see, the App2Container knows like what you're going to do next. So what it tells you that, okay, check application analysis JSON file, then edit this file as needed, and then start containerization process by running this command. So this is exactly what we're going to do. So App2Container, containerize, and again, we're specifying the ID of application. And the prerequisite to containerize command is that you already run analyze command, so you have this analyze JSON file generated. So let's run this command, and what it will do, it will generate deployment.json file, which again you can configure as you need, and I will show this file once it's generated.
So let's then bring in that question that I didn't find before. I can't really pronounce that username, so skipping that. When you say App2Container, you mean an app in your current server to a cloud AWS container?
Yeah, so what we do, we generate a Docker container image out of your application, and when we generate all required AWS infrastructure to run this container on AWS cloud. So it will create your ECS cluster, it will create Elastic Container Registry, it will upload container image from your local server to Elastic Container Registry, it will create application load balancer, it will register all required listeners, and everything will be done according to best practices from AWS. So what you will have at the end, you have your application running locally on your server, and as a result you will have like exactly same application but running in container on AWS cloud. Okay, so the containerize command was successful. So let's see what we have now. So again, if I go to this artifacts folder, you see that there are a few more files created. So first it's deployment .json. Let's see how it looks like. So this file tells App2Container what to do next. So it says that, okay, this is the container image. And by the way, let me show. So if I run Docker image, so you see that the new container image is created a minute ago. And yeah, it's 7 gigabytes because it's Windows Server Core, but this is container image generated locally. And if we go back, then we specify either ECS parameters or EKS parameters. So at this point, you need to decide where you are going to deploy your application. Either you're going to deploy it to Elastic Container Service, or you are going to deploy it to Elastic Kubernetes Service. So in our case, we're going to deploy it to Elastic Container Service. So we're just saying, okay, please create ECS artifacts for me. And then I specify number of vCPUs, amount of memory for this specific container image, some resource tags which I needed, and then it's another section called reuse resources. So imagine that I have a number of applications running on my server, and I want to deploy all of these applications to the cloud. So I don't want to create a VPC for each application. I don't want to create a new ECS cluster for each application. So I want to deploy all applications to the same cluster into the same VPC. So here I can say that these are the VPC which I want to reuse. This is the existing stack which I want to reuse. And also App2Container can identify if your application is using Windows authentication. So you can specify global managed service identity parameters so that you can use Windows authentication when you containerize your application.
So
this,
a question on the ECS parameters above. For the cluster, you had 2 CPUs and a certain amount of memory and so on. Is that based on anything around the existing application, or where does those numbers come from? Are just the default settings?
I think these are just default settings which you can adjust in this JSON file. Okay, so what else is generated? Also under artifacts, now you see that it copied all required files. So it analyzed what files are used by this application and it just copied it to the artifact file. And then it generated Docker file. So it says what is the base image, and then it removes. So like you see, there is a lot of boilerplate code, which otherwise you need to generate yourself. But App2Container does it for yourself. And also what it says, like Windows authentication is not detected. But if App2Container will detect Windows authentication, then it will add more stuff to this Docker file. And also, if you need specific Windows features, you just need to uncomment a few lines and then.
And those are the same we had on the server, right? So
yes. So it's what App2Container does, it tries to analyze like how your server looks like, and what are probably using and what are probably requirements of your application. So, okay, so this is what is generated, and then based on this Docker container image, the actual Docker image is built. And next, if we let me find my another screen. Sometimes I think that 2 screens are easier, but when you move back and forth.
So if you just joined us, welcome to AWS Nordics Office Hours. I am joined today by Alexander Dragunov. We're talking about migrating and containerizing existing or legacy applications using AWS App2Container. And Alexander has so far walked us through the different migration strategies, how we can use App2Container locally to install it, to initialize it, and then analyze our Windows servers to find what applications are running, and then based on that, containerize, create a container image based on the application running.
Yeah, so let me run next command, and then I will switch to the AWS console to see what is created. So the next command will be, and I think App2Container shows you. So yeah, next steps. View the container image with Docker images. So this is what we did. And when you're ready to deploy, please edit deployment file. And I showed you how deployment file looks like. We are fine with it. So let's run next command. And let me select it. Yeah, so App2Container, generate app deployment, and then specify the application ID. So this command will not deploy anything to AWS Cloud yet, but it will generate all CloudFormation templates, which will be used later on to deploy the application. So what it's doing now, it's generating all CloudFormation templates. And again, this CloudFormation templates, it's a opinionated way of how you do your deployment. But again, everything in this CloudFormation templates you can modify if you have any specific needs. So let's see what is generated now. So if we go to artifacts, then there is ECS deployment folder, and it has the ECS master template. And this template, it has a number of nested templates, which I will show. But again, so this is opinionated way of how you deploy the application. And you see, it's, 600 lines of code of CloudFormation template, which was just generated for you. So imagine you deploy application to containers yourself. Like there is a lot of things you need to do. You need to think like how you create VPC, how you create a cluster, etc., etc. Here is done for you. But again, if you want to change something, you just change it here. So for example, by default, it wants to deploy to C4 for extra large instance. So this will be the instance on which containers will be running. But I don't know. I want to deploy it to C5 to extra large. Okay, so this is the CloudFormation template, which I can edit based on my needs. But I wanted to show you what is. So let me try to move screen from one to another.
If you have any questions in the meantime, just pop them into the chat and I'll bring them to Alexander.
So this is my folder, my S3 bucket with artifacts, which I configured during the App2Container init. So it was empty, but now if I refresh it, so these are the sub templates. So these are the templates which nested templates which will be used by the main CloudFormation template, which I showed you. So it's how you create VPC, how you create web app, how you add specific roles, if you need to use Windows authentication, etc., etc. So there's a lot of templates which you can actually learn from. So even if you these are your templates. You just go grab them, check what it's doing, learn something. You can use default settings, so you can modify based on your needs. So this is what was generated by App2Container. And the last command which you would want to execute, it would be, as it says, AWS CloudFormation deploy. So what it will do, it will just, so it's a standard AWS CLI command, which will deploy the template which was generated by App2Container, and you specify the stack name. So the execution of this command, it takes, I don't know, like 20-25 minutes. So I already did it before. So again, I will show you how my S3 console looks like. So if I go to CloudFormation, and if I search, so this is what was deployed by this AWS command. And these are the templates which I haven't modified. So these are the ones which were generated by App2Container. So this is the main template, and there is a number of nested ones. So we have only 5 here because we don't use Windows authentication. So if I use Windows authentication, it will be few more here. So it created new VPC, it created application load balancer, it created ECS cluster, it deployed the application to ECS cluster. So, and if we go to the main template, to the outputs, so this is the URL of public URL of a load balancer with which points to our application running in ECS cluster in container. So if I open it in a new tab, so it's exactly same application, but running now in container.
Right.
So I haven't modified anything. So what I did is just run series of App2Container commands one by one, and my application is just up and running, but inside the container.
That's pretty cool. So you mentioned before some limitations so far with App2Container. Can you just mention what some of the known limitations right now are, now that we have your applications?
Yeah, so as I said, we have two kinds of applications supported: ASP.NET applications running on iOS and Java applications. For ASP.NET applications, we don't support applications which are dependent on Windows Communication Foundation yet. Then applications which are using file and registry outside of iOS web application directory. So for example, if your application is, I don't know, reading files on another disk, so we cannot identify it. So your application should be like contained inside iOS application. And then applications which are dependent on other Windows services or processes which run outside of iOS. So these are the current limitations of for Windows-based applications. Also, it doesn't support applications which are running on client operating systems like Windows 7 or Windows 10. So you need to have Windows server-based application. And when we talk about Java applications, so we support Tomcat and JBoss applications, but we don't support like cluster high availability mode for Java applications. But like, I'm not Java guy, so I cannot go like into more details. But all these limitations, they are listed on our website, so you can read about it.
Yes, I posted the link in the chat about supported applications. I think that's where it gives you those limitations as well. So previously, you also mentioned CI/CD in regards to App2Container.
Yeah, so what we generate now, so we run this command to generate app deployment. But what we can also do, there is another command. So we generated app deployment, which generated VPC cluster deployed application for us. But what we can do, we can also generate CI/CD pipeline. So and again, this will be opinionated CI/CD pipeline based on the best practices, which will create. I need to first edit the configuration file. Just a second. And the artifacts pipeline. And where is my Visual Studio Code? So it will generate CI/CD pipeline. So I will deploy better pipeline.
All right. So enabling it for ECS in this case.
Yes. So if I run it again, so again, it generated number of CloudFormation templates with CI/CD pipeline. So we don't have source code for our application. So like the entry point will be the Docker container, but then it will be CI/CD pipeline to deploy this Docker container to the cluster. And again, it's just a number of CloudFormation templates generated, which you can look, you can learn from them, you can modify them, but you get our best practice opinionated way to deploy containerized applications to a cloud.
Yeah, once again, it's a great starting point for continuously building these pipelines for you. You can add additional steps. You can, if you then start refactoring your application, you have CI/CD in place already. So great starting point.
Yeah.
So what would be the next step now then? Now that you have your application in place, we say that we have the pipeline in place from a migration standpoint.
Okay, so what you did, you have your CI/CD pipeline generated, you have your application containerized. So basically, what we said initially, you replatformed your application from running on your local server to running in container on AWS. But this application is running as it is. And again, maybe it's something your company will be comfortable with. So you don't want to develop this application further. So it's up and running in the cloud. It's more secure. You can scale it easily and other benefits of a cloud. But probably you don't want to stop here and you want to use, I know, Linux containers instead of Windows containers to make it even faster, more lightweight. And we have another tools which can help you to modernize your application. So for .NET Framework applications, we have a tool called Porting Assistant, which helps you as far as it can to port your application to .NET Core or .NET 5. So maybe this could be the next step.
Cool. And now I know you have, let me find the link. There is an App2Container workshop if people want to try this out themselves. So let me post that in the chat as well.
Yes, and this workshop, it covers both containerizing of Java applications and containerizing of Windows applications. Because what I showed today is how you containerize your .NET Framework applications. But if you are Java guy and you want to learn how to containerize your Java applications, you can just follow the steps in this workshop and you get your hands dirty with Java applications and see how it works.
It's cool. So I posted the link in the chat now. So have a look at the workshop. It's self-paced, so you'll walk through it yourself, the different steps to use App2Container. All right, we're approaching top of the hour, but we still have a few minutes left if people have any questions around this. But I have something that I want to bring up. I have seen a couple of comments in the chat about it, and that was the release we had last week for AppRunner. So how do AppRunner position towards App2Container or vice versa, perhaps?
So it's a very good question, because I realized when I was running this demo that if I run different commands, so what it says that your current version is 1.3 and there is a new version 1.4 available for upgrade. So I didn't dare to do it in my demo environment, because you never know if my demo will continue working or I need to do some configuration changes. But I checked our documentation on what's new in version 1.4, and actually one of the new things in version 1.4 is support for AppRunner. So as you remember in this analysis JSON file, in deployment JSON file, you have two options, ECS parameters and EKS parameters. But what we added is a way to run your application in AppRunner. So it will be like another section, AppRunner parameters, where you specify AppRunner specific parameters. So it was very nice release of App2Container, which it was 1 day after we released AppRunner, we released version of App2Container which supports AppRunner. And from what I read from documentation, currently it's only for Linux-based applications, because AppRunner doesn't support Windows-based applications. But for your Java applications running on Linux, AppRunner could be an option to run, and App2Container supports it, latest version.
Yeah, so that answers a few of the questions we had in the chat earlier on. So, and AWS App Runner, if you haven't heard about it, it's a newly launched service that is a fully managed container service from AWS. So you're able to run containers in very easy way getting up and running with using containers on AWS. So do check out AWS App Runner if you haven't already. And now with, you said version 1.4 of App2Container, there is then support to use App2Container and App Runner together.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So 5 minutes to go. There is a question. Let me put it up on the screen. So let's go through it together. Is there a way to deploy application having a configurable environment variable somewhere in UI? I'm doing some testing with my application. I have to run like 10 parallel Docker instances every time I make some small change, like the URL to hit. I need to change every Docker image. What would be the best way to encounter this? So if I get this question correctly, there is something in the application that needs to change, some type of configuration. Do you read it the same way, Alexander?
Yes. So I think like the easy maybe. So you have access to all artifacts which are generated by App2Container. So you can expose some environmental variables in the Docker file, and then. But the problem is that you are containerizing existing application. So if application is already using environmental variables, then it's fine. You just set the value of this environment variable in the Docker file. But if application is not using it yet, then you need to change application itself. So it's outside of scope of App2Container.
Yeah, so you need to have the application already being able to use variables or environment variables in that case for that to work. So if you don't have access, if it doesn't and you don't have access to the source code, you won't be using it. If this question isn't directly related to App2Container, rather that this is a refactor or a newly developed application, that instead opens up a lot of different ways of doing this. Environment variables being one. Another way would be to use app config, for instance, having configuration separately in app config. So there are different ways of doing that. So instead of then creating new Docker images every time, you would just change the environment variable or the configuration in app config. So short answer, perhaps, to something that would need some more deep dive to answer more correctly. All right, 2 minutes left. So I think it's time to wrap it up. Alexander, final words on App2Container?
Yeah, as I usually say, give it a try, make your hands dirty, and see if you can use it in your organization with your applications, because it can really simplify your life.
Yeah, I think that's a great final words. And what I thought about when watching this is that you could split it up. You can just use the first parts of just containerizing the applications. You can then deploy it any way you wish to ECS, EKS, and so on. You don't have to go through all the steps. Isn't that right, Alexander?
Yeah, exactly. And you can use this tool just to learn how we think the best practice of deployment this kind of application is. So maybe you don't deploy this application, but you will learn from all these CloudFormation templates which are generated, which is a good source of learning.
For sure. All right. So with that, I want to thank Alexander for joining us once again to walk us through AWS App2Container. Thanks everyone for watching, and thanks for your comments and questions. Do continue watching us every Monday. Next week, we're going to talk about AWS Proton, which is a way of doing application development to container and serverless applications. So join us then. My name is Gunnar Grosch, and I was joined today by Alexander Dragunov. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.